This is the second part of the 5-minute guide to the Queen Elizabeth class battleships, covering the career of 4 out of 5 of the ships. They entered service between 1915 and 1916, and the whole class, except for the lead ship, would have their first taste of action at the Battle of Jutland. The Queen Elizabeth went for trials in the Mediterranean and was sent to assist the Gallipoli landings, becoming the only dreadnought battleship to take part in the assault. Her 15-inch guns were used to attack the fortifications from an unexpected direction, as they could fire from outside the straits, over the peninsula blocking line of sight, and into the defences. Although these attacks were highly effective, they could not swing the battle in the Allies' favour alone, and she would return to the Grand Fleet as part of 5th Battle Squadron, but was undergoing a refit at the time of Battle of Jutland, thus becoming the only ship of her class to miss this encounter. During the First World War, both Barham and Valiant would have collisions with the Warspite at different times, in both cases needing minor repairs. At the Battle of Jutland, the Valiant fired 288 of its 15-inch shells at the German High Seas Fleet. Unlike her sisters, she would suffer no damage in return. Malaya was hit 8 times and took major damage. 65 men would die in battle or later of their injuries. Uniquely, among the ships at the battle, HMS Malaya flew the red, white, black and yellow ensign of the Federated Malay States. The Barham's history at the battle is somewhat better documented. She fired at the battle cruiser Von der Tann at a range of about 23,000 yards and scored 1 hit on the German ship's stern before she was ordered to switch targets to the Moltke, together with Valiant. But that single hit would allow over 1,000 tons of water to flood the stern and almost disable the ship's steering gear. Between them, Barham and Valiant would then go on to hit Moltke 4 times and cause a lot of flooding. Barham would be hit twice in exchange during this period by an 11-inch shell from Von der Tann that didn't do any damage, and a 12-inch shell from Lutzow that detonated in the aft superstructure but did no significant damage. As the 5th Battle Squadron turned away in the face of the High Seas Fleet, Barham was struck by a number of 12-inch shells from the battleships, which inflicted moderate damage and casualties. In return, Barham helped to land 3 hits on Seydlitz and Lutzow, whilst being hit twice more, again without suffering significant damage. In contrast, the hit on Lutzow flooded a 5.9-inch magazine, and the hits on Seydlitz blew a 10 by 13-foot hole in the side of her bow. These 2 hits were ultimately responsible for the massive flooding that nearly sank the ship after the battle. As the 5th Battle Squadron withdrew, Barham would keep firing on the German ships and inflicted more hits and damage before switching fire to the German battleships as they withdrew. She fired 337 15-inch shells and 25 6-inch shells during the battle. The number of hits she scored can't be confirmed, but it's believed that she and Valiant made something between 23 or 24 hits between them, which would make them the most accurate warships in the British fleet. She was hit 6 times during the battle, suffering casualties of 26 killed and 46 wounded. After the First World War, the class became part of the Atlantic Fleet until 1924, when they were transferred to the Mediterranean Fleet. The Valiant would then spend a short period being used to help enforce the law in Liverpool during a police strike when rioting broke out in the city. I don't really quite know how you enforce the law on the streets with a battleship, but let us know if you've got any ideas. All the ships of the class would receive major refits in the late 1920s and early 1930s, but Queen Elizabeth and Valiant, along with Warspite, would receive further extensive modernisation. Barham would receive a partial modernisation, and Malaya would not receive anything of the sort. The most extensive modernisations saw the ships receive a new tower bridge and fire control system, and the old secondary battery of 6-inch guns was completely replaced by many 4.5-inch guns, and even more deck armour was installed. The main guns were also modified to be able to elevate to 30 degrees, which increased their range substantially. The Valiant and Barham would take part in separate operations against the French and Vichy French fleets to prevent their use by the Germans in 1940. And in 1941, Valiant and Barham, along with Warspite, would all take part in the Battle of Cape Matapan, where they would sink a number of Italian heavy cruisers in a close night engagement. During this period, various ships of the class would cover the evacuation of Crete, bombard various enemy positions, and escort a number of critical convoys. Queen Elizabeth and Valiant would be mined in Alexandria harbour by Italian special forces towards the end of the year, and would need significant repairs, technically sinking, but in incredibly shallow water to a degree that they could actually be disguised as simply fully loaded. Both Barham and Malaya were hit by torpedoes early in the war, but would survive these incidents and be repaired. However, Barham's luck ran out in late 1941 when she, along with Queen Elizabeth and Valiant, with an escort of 8 destroyers, left Alexandria to cover the 7th and 15th cruiser squadrons as they went after Italian convoys. The fleet was spotted by U-331, which was in turn detected by the destroyer Jervis, but the contact was disregarded by an inexperienced sonar operator. Shades of the loss of the Ark Royal there. The submarine was now at point-blank range, thanks to this, and found itself next to Barham. There was no time for evasive action, and 3 of the 4 torpedoes would hit the ship amidships, so closely together that they seemed to throw up a single gigantic water column. With her defences completely overwhelmed, Barham quickly capsized to port and was lying on her side when a colossal explosion in her main magazine aft occurred about 4 minutes after she was torpedoed. Due to the speed at which she sank, 862 officers and ratings were killed. The sinking itself was captured on film by cameramen from Pathé News aboard Valiant. In 1943, Valiant herself would cover Allied landings against Sicily using its main guns, and Malaya was mainly used for convoy escort duty since her lack of modernisation meant that she was nowhere near as capable as the other surviving ships of the class, and this went on until summer 1943 when she was placed in reserve. During this time, her entire 6-inch secondary battery was removed for use elsewhere, and her anti-aircraft armament was significantly enhanced. This led to May 1944, where she was used as a target ship for inert bouncing bomb prototypes, one of which was a little bit too much on the ball and punched a hole in the ship's side. She would be reactivated after some repairs just before the Normandy landings to act as a reserve bombardment battleship, and would finally be withdrawn from all service at the end of 1944, becoming an accommodation ship for a torpedo school before being scrapped in 1948. Queen Elizabeth and Valiant, meanwhile, were sent to the Eastern Fleet, where they took part in raids against Japanese bases. However, on the 8th of August 1944, Valiant was severely damaged when a floating dry dock she was in was raised incorrectly. As a result, the dry dock was overstressed at its ends, broke its back, and sank. It was decided to sail Valiant to Alexandria, where there were suitable docking facilities for repairs, but she couldn't steer a straight course, and couldn't make more than 8 knots due to the damage to her propellers and rudder. She would get as far as Suez Bay, but in this state was in no fit state to attempt the Suez Canal. After cutting away the various damaged parts, she would return to the UK and be decommissioned in July 1945. Queen Elizabeth, meanwhile, would stay in the Pacific, taking part in further fleet operations with the British Pacific Fleet until the war ended, and would be placed in reserve and scrapped in 1948.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.